Hi all, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. It is Wednesday, which means it is normally Serial Killer Wednesday, but I might change this because there are some killers that I would like to go into the psychology of, but they are not serial killers. They haven't killed more than 3 people. So I might just call it Killer Wednesdays. And today isn't technically a serial killer. He is a mass shooter. His name is Jared Lee Loughner, and he shot, I think it was like at a Congress rally, but that is the story that we are going to focus on today, is the story of Jared Lee Loughner. So, book of stories. So he was the only child of Randy and Amy Loughner, and they were described as a very private family. Amy worked for the city parks department, and Randy was a retired gasoline truck driver. It doesn't say if he had any jobs after this. And it was said that Jared had a pretty normal childhood. He was a little odd, and I think he mostly kept to himself. He had a few friends, but he did mostly keep to himself. In later years, so in school he did have, like I said, some close friends, but in later years, so like later teenage years and adult years, he mostly kept to himself. I think he was quite isolated. He dropped out of high school in 2006, and those who knew him said that at this time he had quite the personality change. They didn't actually say what the personality change was, but later on we find that he is very much into conspiracy theories, and he has these ideas that are very radical. He was then fired from his job at the Quinzel restaurant, and again, he had obviously worked there for some time, and even the manager had noticed that he had a complete personality transformation. A lot of people actually say this. It's kind of like he just changed like that overnight. He briefly volunteered at a local animal shelter, but he was then eventually asked to leave. I believe what had happened was he was walking the dogs in an area where they weren't allowed to be walked. It didn't say why they weren't allowed to be walked there, but he just kept taking them to this area. And it was kind of like every time he was told, you can't walk the dogs here, it's like he couldn't comprehend what he was being told. A former friend of Jared's, Tong Shan, stated that she last saw Loughner after he was suspended from college. So he had gone from high school and he did get into college. Just before he bought the handgun that was used in the shooting, this was when this has happened. So he'd been suspended, and this was literally just before he had got the handgun. It was mentioned that Loughner was anti-government, but he had never appealed violent or aggressive. He had certain ideas. I also think at one point he had this belief that women should not be in charge. He did, however, have 2 prior offences that got him in trouble with the police. In October 2007, he was cited in Prima County for drug possession, and he actually did use recreational drugs. I believe he used cocaine. I'm not sure of the other drugs he used. And in October 13th, 2008, he was charged for defacing a street sign. I can't speak today, I swear. In a small area near Tucson. Another classmate of Jared, Zara Alser, who she was also a very close friend when they were in high school, and she indicated that Loughner's life really began to unravel when he had his first breakup with his very first girlfriend. He began abusing alcohol and drugs, and these drugs included cannabis, cocaine, psychedelics, and hallucinogens. And this could possibly be a reason for why he suddenly had these very extreme views on women and politics. After struggling for 2 years, Loughner then gave up the alcohol and recreational drugs in 2008, but I believe he still took marijuana. He then tried to join the US Army, but he was rejected as being unqualified for the military service in 2008. Now, Loughner, during the application, did admit to previously using drugs and alcohol, and he did state that he did continue to use marijuana, and this again was why he obviously didn't progress it even further. Another former classmate, Katie Parker, remembers Loughner as a pothead, so this use of drugs isn't a new thing. It was maybe just back in school, he just mainly maybe used marijuana. In the months leading up to the shooting, his parents did become quite alarmed by his behaviour, and like a few others and his bosses and classmates, they had noticed a drastic personality shift. They even resorted to disabling his car every night to keep him home, so they probably feared that he was going to do something. He then became obsessed with controlling his lucid dreams, so this is what he referred them as, but I'm not sure if this was during the drug taking. That could have been what that was. And from February to September 2010, Loughner had several run-ins with, at this time he was at the college, and he had several run-ins with campus police for disruption and in his classes and very bizarre behaviour. The college were worried about Loughner's mental state, and they unfortunately decided to suspend him because his actions, I guess, were getting to the point that they just couldn't have him in the college anymore. But they did send a letter to his parents in order to discuss his behaviour, and they wanted to discuss this with both Loughner and his parents in the same vicinity. Many college classmates recalled this particular incident where, Loughner had basically mocked a student for going through an abortion. They were obviously going through it in one of the classes, and she was describing her experience with an abortion, and he apparently just made fun of her, laughed at the situation, and he also began making comments of terrorism and making a bomb for a fetus, while another classmate was reading a poem regarding abortion. So he had these very bizarre outbursts. Friends also remember Loughner saying that women shouldn't be in power, and he had a particular dislike for, I think she was a congresswoman, Gabby Giffords. Another friend, Zach Alser, stated that conspiracy theories did have a significant effect on Loughner, and he believed in many conspiracies regarding the 9/11 attacks and the 2012 apocalypse, which a lot of Mayans believed at that time. And then this kind of all led up to the day of the shooting. So Loughner allegedly bought a 9mm Glock pistol from a Sportsman warehouse in November 30th of 2010. And the night before the shooting, he left a message at 2:05 a.m. on a friend's voicemail. And it was quite a worrying message. The friend didn't really know what it meant. And he just said, "Hey man, it's me, Jared. Me and you had good times. Peace out." So, quote. He also had a MySpace post at 4:25 a.m. This is a quote, but I'm leaving some bits out because it was quite a large quote. But basically, the gist of it was, "Goodbye, friends. Don't be mad at me. I want to make it out alive." And again, this was quite concerning to anyone who was reading this because they had no idea what they were talking about. And his mental state was quite poor at this time. He then uploaded a picture of what was a handgun sitting on top of a file named US History. January 8th, 2011 at 7:04 a.m. Loughner went to a Walmart to purchase ammunition. However, he then didn't buy any ammunition from this Walmart and then went to another Walmart in North Cataro Road at 7:28 a.m. He was then actually stopped by Arizona Game and Fish Department by Officer Alan Fornley at 7:34 a.m. for running a red light. However, there was no outstanding warrants for Jared, and so he then allowed Loughner to continue to his destination. And unfortunately, if he had any outstanding warrants and this man had known this at the time, the shooting may not have even taken place. Loughner then took a taxi to a Safeway location, and this particular location was where Gabby Giffords was holding a constituent meeting. And remember, he had a very, very bad dislike for this woman. It's never explained why. He just did not like her in the slightest. The shooting then occurred at 10:10 a.m. where he opened fire on Giffords at close range, hitting her and bystanders numerous times. Unfortunately, he did kill 6 people and 13 people were injured. Giffords was shot in the head and she was very critically injured, and unfortunately she did pass away. He was stopped by bystanders and arrested by police, but when he was arrested he pleaded the fifth. So I think in America this means they don't wish to speak and they don't have to say anything. They can just say no comment. He was charged in federal court with 1 count of attempted assassination, 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. He was held without bail in the Correctional Institute in Phoenix, and he was completely isolated from any other inmate. He was in his cell by himself 23 hours a day, and he was allowed out for 1 hour to kind of shower, do any activities, have a walk around. It was kind of noted that Loughner had this smile during his arrest, and he originally pled not guilty, but it wasn't actually him who pled not guilty. He just refused to make a plea, so the judge on his behalf made the plea of not guilty. I didn't even know they could do that. So during sentencing there was some sort of plea deal. So basically if he pleaded he wouldn't get the death penalty. So he pleaded guilty to 19 counts avoiding the death penalty. And with his behaviour just drastically changing as he was a teenager, they got a forensic psychologist in, and this psychologist stated that Loughner was showing depressive symptoms of schizophrenia, and he was officially diagnosed in 2011. So schizophrenia is a psychological disorder, and it is kind of described as a long-term, very severe psychological disorder. It can cause a range of psychological symptoms, and these can kind of range from very bad depression, very low moods, hallucinations, delusions. There's a lot that goes into the symptoms of schizophrenia, and sadly it can lead to wrongful diagnosis of depression. So people would usually be incorrectly diagnosed with depression or bipolar disorder when that's not what they're going through at all. Loughner would go through depressive episodes, and he would have these delusions where he would completely believe in these conspiracies about the 9/11 attacks, as I had said earlier, and you know, political conspiracies, and that's where these would have come in. He also had trouble at work and school, and again, that is another symptom of schizophrenia. I mean, he was like a typical you know, young guy, and then all of a sudden, a lot of people who knew him said he just went through this completely transformation, you know. He was then able to stand trial and agreed with the guilty plea. He was sentenced to serve 7 consecutive life sentences, so that means just one after the other. He will never get out. And he is currently serving time at the Federal Medical Center in Minnesota, and this is basically a prison for those with very severe mental illnesses. And that is the story of Jared Lee Loughner. It's kind of, because it seems that he went through this personality change when he was a teenager, it is very, very difficult to diagnose childhood schizophrenia. Even at 16, 18, doctors will not diagnose you because your brain is still developing, and this could be to do with hormones, so it is very difficult to diagnose. And unfortunately, because these symptoms were not managed and because nobody really knew what was going on with him, he couldn't get the help he needed, and it definitely played a part in the shooting. And I am not saying that people with mental health disorders or psychological disorders, that they are violent and aggressive. No, this is just simply an explanation for why these events might have occurred. If you have any sort of killers that you would like me to look at, definitely leave it in the comments, because I love learning about killers and the events that go with this. That sounds really macabre, doesn't it? But that's just what I'm into. So every Wednesday, as you know, I upload these videos, and every Saturday I upload a spooky haunting videos. And if this is something you're into, definitely give this video